The 2024 USC Trojans football team is regarded by most to be a true wild card team. What do I mean by that? I mean that this team could finish with 5 to 6 wins and really flounder in the new conference that they align themselves with, that being the Big Ten Conference, and their style of play does not match up to the Big Ten style of play. On the other hand, they could also fly past everyone and finish with 9 to 11 wins and be a contender for the college football playoff and the Big Ten championship game. So, on this episode of the Big Ten Quick Talk podcast, I break down USC's roster and grade it on a scale of A to D. And then, in the second half of the video, we move on to a schedule breakdown. And by the end of the video, you will know my thoughts on whether USC will be a more floundering team in the Big Ten, more average team in the Big Ten, or a top-end, higher-tier team in the Big Ten. So stick around through the whole video, comment your thoughts on USC below, and as always, subscribe. So now that we have all that out of the way, let's move to the roster, and let's get right into it here. On the offensive side of the ball, at quarterback, I have an A- grade. I'm not ready to give Miller Moss a grade yet because we haven't seen him play in the majority of a season's games, but from what we saw last year in the bowl game, he was excellent, shredded apart a good Louisville defense, and I have zero doubts that he'll really play well with the Lincoln Riley system of offense. Lincoln Riley can turn any quarterback into looking better than he actually is. Now, I'm not saying that Millard Moss is going to be an imposter, but I'm saying that Millard Moss is going to learn so much from Lincoln Riley and the style of offense that they play, and he will be a much better quarterback because of it. Now, I gave the USC running back room a B- because they lost a lot of talent from that running back room from last year, such as Marshawn Lloyd and Austin Jones, and they replaced that with the Mississippi State transfer Woody Marks, and he is my impact transfer, for this USC team, chiefly because he is one of the only transfers on offense for USC, and that will really make an impact. And really, the other reason is he hasn't really produced as much as a top tier running back really should. He's had over 500 yards of offense for 2 straight years now in 2022 and 2023, but never above 600 yards a season for Mississippi State. But he is a guy that's had a lot of experience, a ton of carries, and I think that will sit well for USC going into this season. But because he's not elite, I think he's good, but he's not great at running back, and they lost pieces from the previous year, so I think that this grade is good at a B-. And now we'll talk about the USC wide receiver / tight end, basically the receiver room for the USC Trojans, and really headlining this room is none other than the sophomore Zachariah Branch. This dude has top-end elite speed, can run every type of route, which is paramount for a really speedy guy. They can't just run post routes and go routes. They need to be able to run every type of route all over the field, and that's what Zachariah Branch brings to the table. And he's their primary kick returner, and he has electric stuff in that department as well. Elsewhere on the offense, with the wide receivers, you have players like Deuce Robinson, Jacoby Lane, Makai Lemon. All these players are really solid players that play in a system that benefits them exponentially in the Lincoln Riley system. I'm really going to come back to this all throughout talking about this offense because, and you see it there with the potential strengths with coaching, this coaching makes this offense so much more better. It makes it exponentially better. And that's why I have this wide receiver tight end room at an A-, not only because of the talent in this room, which is through the roof, but also because the coaching gives it exponentially more upside. And let's not forget about the tight end Lake McRae, who is a very underrated tight end, started most of last year, and he's rehabbing from an injury now. Hopefully we'll start week 1. We'll see about that. But really behind him is not too much else. So I would be worried that if he doesn't come back for the start of the season, which might be a possibility from what I'm reading, but uh, he is a very good tight end, and this room is very solid. Not an elite room, but a great room in my opinion. So I have them at an A minus. Now we'll finish up the offense with the offensive line here. And this offensive line retains a very important piece in Jonah Monheim, who will play at center for them most likely. He is a stud at the offensive line position. But other than that, there are really no outstanding studs on this team. But the important thing is that all these players that returned were from last year. All these players that are starting this year were from last year, which means that they have a connection with each other. They aren't just a bunch of transfers coming together and trying to play as a unit. They are already a unit, which is huge, especially at a group like offensive line. And last year's troubles, I think, on the offensive line were attributed to the fact that there were a lot of transfers that came in and they hadn't really played together as a unit. And that is so fundamental when it comes to the offensive line. The group has to play together and they have to have a feeling of togetherness with them in order to really play as a good unit. Now, do I think that they are going to be good at offensive line? I think they will be good, but I don't think that they're really going to get past that level. I think that they're going to be pretty average on the offensive line. They're going to be better than last year, but I don't see them getting past a B minus grade. Now on the defensive line, I gave this grade a B minus, pretty much solely because Bear Alexander does come back. Otherwise, this room would have been a lot lower. Yes, they do bring in Nate Clifton, a transfer, and they retain Anthony Lucas at defensive end. But Bear Alexander is the real highlight of this room, and there's not much else behind him. I hate to say it, but they're a bit thin at the defensive line position. But really, Bear Alexander, I can't say enough about this guy. Transferred in from Georgia a year ago. Tried to transfer out, but they recommitted him in this offseason. And he is a guy that just is a game wrecker. And when positioned right by D'Anton Lynn instead of Alex Grinch, I think that he will have a monster season. At linebacker, I hate to be harsh, but this is a C grade, and there really is nothing really special in this room, in my opinion. This room brought in a couple transfers. The only returning linebacker, Mason Cobb, will be solid at best, but really there's nothing too special in this room that makes me want to say that this room is going to be one of the top rooms or even a middling room in the Big Ten. If I were to grade this linebacker room on a 1 to 18 scale, 1 for each team, it would be more in the 15s range than it would be in the 10s range, in my opinion. I don't think it's average. I think it's pretty low. I hate to be harsh, but I think they could have done more to beef up this room with more star power, you could say. And it's not that I'm just looking for that, but I'm looking at this room and I'm saying that they need a guy there. They need a guy that will be really solid for them. And Mason Cobb could come close to that. But other than that, I don't think that the linebacker room will be particularly elite for them. At secondary, this is my biggest question mark on this whole team. They reloaded, bringing in players like Kamari Ramsey, Akil Arnold, and they lost a guy in Sayer Wright, who is going to be very good this year. But they retained guys like Jalen Smith, Jacoby Covington, and these guys this could be one of the best rooms. This could be their best room on defense. It really could be. But I have it as a potential weakness because this room, with all of its turnover, losing a starter in Sayer Wright, and then bringing in two guys in Akil Arnold and Kamari Ramsey, that really, there isn't a lot of camaraderie there. And really, the secondary, if it's not well coordinated, they're going to bust coverages on a daily basis, on a series by series basis. And that's why it could be a potential weakness, but I could also see this being a potential strength, even though I didn't put it down in the potential strength category, because this unit has a ton of talent. Again, Kamari Ramsey, my impact transfer on the defensive side of the ball, Achille Arnold, a guy who is going to be very good. Players that have played for D'Anton Lynn. Jacoby Covington could be solid. Jalen Smith could be solid. But really, this is a true wild card room, in my opinion. Now we move to the USC Trojans schedule breakdown. Notice that this is not a prediction because my prediction videos for certain teams will be coming out later in the summer. Another reason to subscribe and turn on notifications, as you can stay connected with this growing Big Ten Quick Talk community so that you can be alerted when more USC content drops on this channel, which will be happening. Anyway, getting to the schedule breakdown, you will notice that as we go through, I have games that USC has a 0 to 30% chance of winning in the orange color. Pick'em games will be in that USC reddish brown color. Games that I think USC will be favored in by 60 to 80% will be in the purple, and then a certified win, a game that I think USC is guaranteed to win, all but said and done, is in the light blue, and that's where we start here, where I think the two games that I think USC is a absolute lock to win, put it down in Sharpie, versus Utah State and at UCLA. Really no need for explanation here. So let's move on to the next category. Our next category here will be the 0 to 30% chance of winning range. And here we have at Michigan. I think that this is pretty much a lock here. I think that Michigan will be favored about 75 to 20, about 75% chance of winning here. Versus Penn State, I was back and forth on this one, but I think that Penn State is going to be an elite team this year under James Franklin, so I would put this more at about 70-30 Penn State lean. And then at the end of the season versus Notre Dame, Notre Dame's had USC's number, and Notre Dame comes in as, I think, a better overall team, both on defense and possibly even on offense, and I think at special teams as well. So I think Notre Dame is going to be the more well-rounded team in this matchup. And even though it is at USC at the Coliseum, I think that Notre Dame will come out and play very well. Notice that this is not a prediction, but I think that USC will not be favored in this one. I think that Notre Dame will be favored in this one about 70 to 30. Now the next category, the category in which I think USC will has a edge of about 60 to 80%, this purple category. Let's go through this game by game. At Minnesota, I don't think Minnesota will be a very good team at all next year for a variety of reasons, but that is for the Minnesota season preview. And I think that USC will be able to score honestly upwards of 31 to 35 points in this game and be able to just fly on by and just throw the air raid offense completely at Minnesota, and Minnesota will not be able to stop it. At Maryland, Maryland's a team, again, I don't think that will play very well next year. They lost a lot of talent last year, and there's a lot of turnover at the quarterback position. Again, the most important position in football. So I think that Maryland, again, a topic for the Maryland season preview, but I don't think they're going to be very good. And I think USC will stomp all over them. Again, not a prediction, but this is a breakdown. Versus Rutgers. Rutgers, I think, will be very good this year, but I see USC matching up very well to the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. I think that USC, one of their better position groups on defense, could be the defensive line by this point in time, and that would match up well with the run heavy style of the Rutgers offense. And I think that the main battle to watch in this one would be the USC passing attack versus the Rutgers secondary, which is very good, but I think the USC secondary, the USC passing attack is going to be too much for Rutgers in this one. Again, not a prediction. But at Washington here in Week 10 is my last game that I think USC will be favored in by about 60 to 80%. I think Washington is going to get the short end of the stick in a lot of games. I think that they're a pretty talented team, but I don't think that they're talented enough to face off with a lot of the big dogs in the Big Ten. And I think that USC is a bigger dog in the Big Ten. And I think that USC will be able to beat Washington by a handy amount, even though this is in Washington. And now the last category in this video, the Pick'em category. we will start out here. The neutral site game in Las Vegas versus LSU. LSU is being vastly overrated by the general populace, in my opinion. They do not have a defense outside of Harold Perkins, and their offense lost a ton of production. And I don't think that LSU is a top 15 team. They are a top 25 team, but they're certainly not a top 15 team, at least going into the season. So I think that USC definitely has a chance in this game. It will be a ton of offense and honestly not a whole lot of defense to start out, at least for LSU and possibly for USC as well, seeing as how this is the first game and they'll need some time to get their sea legs under them, stuff like that. The next game that I think will be a pick'em game versus Wisconsin. I think that Wisconsin is going to be a really good team this year, and this game is going to be a very good game. I think Wisconsin matches up very well to USC, and that's the same story with my last pick'em game versus Nebraska. Notice that USC is at home, or at least near to home, in all of these pick'em games, which I think bodes well for them. But versus Nebraska, I think Nebraska really matches up well with USC. Really good defense and an offense that by this point in the season should be really good, in my opinion, with Nebraska. A true pick'em game, in my opinion. So you see the projected win total. I have 6 to 10 wins. I think this is the largest spread out of all the teams that I've covered so far, and I've covered about 6 or 7 teams so far, if you include this one. So really, this season could be an average 6-6 season. But if you add up all the numbers and the wins that I think that they'll have, I think that they're going to have about 8 wins this season. I think that that's the median. I think that that is the most likely outcome for this USC Trojans team, but they could easily get to 9 and 10 wins, but they could easily drop down to 6 or 7 wins. So thank you so much for watching this video. Like and subscribe and comment your thoughts on USC down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.